Hello, hello. I am joined today by my dear friend and esteemed former colleague, Peter Graves. Pete and I have had the pleasure of working together at two companies and also have a beautiful friendship outside of work. And it has been a pleasure getting to know him over the years. Pete has been very much a mentor, role model, and like all around inspirational person in my life. We started working together in 2017 at Fuller's, and it was by 2019 I had left. What year did you leave Fuller's?
20?
2020? Yeah, COVID times, pretty
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
Yeah. And then, we lost touch for a bit, but then, well, maintained a LinkedIn connection. And then Pete got in touch with me in 2021, as he was then working at Mintel, which is the next place we worked together. And he brought me in to be a copywriter on his team. And now we have a really tight knit crew of very good friends who we all worked together at Mintel. And Pete and I are now both solopreneurs doing our own things. And Pete's life before the corporate uh, roles that I've known him in is one of the most interesting and fascinating stories of work, life, and travel. How are you today, Pete?
I'm great, Megan. Thank you very much. And what a nice intro. Thank you.
No worries. Um, can you tell us, Pete, a little about what made you Peter Graves? What were your younger years like?
Oh, well, I was born in London and we lived in Twickenham, but we were a very, very odd family because my dad was in a cult called the School of Economic Science. So most of my early days were driven by how that worked. We were vegetarian. We prayed in Sanskrit. They kind of liked to keep us apart from the rest of society. But to begin with, we had to go to normal schools. And so we
Mhm.
had a bit of normal life and we had some normal neighbours and some normal family members. But once we were in the family and in the cult, we were quite insular. Um, so that formed me very much early on. And then they created their own schools, and their schools were absolutely awful. And
Yes. Mhm.
they beat the boys and sort of tried to brainwash us with all their all their brainwashing techniques that worked on the parents. And the girls got put into arranged marriages, sometimes with their own teachers. And this is all going on in London, West London. So it was a nutty upbringing. Huh?
What years roughly was that?
Oh, so well, I went in there about 75. They started this school, so I was quite a little lad at that point, and I managed to I escaped 4 years later.
Wow. Yeah, I know you've touched on that before, but I didn't really know too much about it. Um, so you escaped, and what did that look like?
It was great. We'd sort of, even when you're, at 9 or 10 years old, you can develop your own opinions, you hope, and figure out that something going on around you is, a real crock of shit.
Hmm.
Um, and the way that, like in 1984, the whole double speak thing, where a word salad gets made up, as we see so very much in politics at the moment.
Yes.
Things are said which, sound one way but mean something else, and um, you know, that was their whole way of operating. So I'm trying to think of stupid rules as well. They had so many stupid rules. The leader of the cult was a guy called Leon McLaren who went off to visit his guru in India and came back. And clearly, they didn't understand each other very well. So he come back with these edicts from the Shankaracharya about what they called the school, but basically the cult, what they must all do now. And they decided on a very particular diet where nothing was cooked. And at the schools, of course, we developed this pathological hatred of cottage cheese, which seemed to be the only thing that you could eat.
Uh-huh.
And then they had all these little rules like honey alone and last, very sanctimonious. But about 20 years later, he went back to the guru and they're having another meeting and again, they couldn't really speak to each other. And he sort of started saying about this this diet that had, these thousands of people on for 20 years. And the guru in India said, "You did what?" I never meant that. They'd all been doing it forever. And
Oh,
we had
wow.
this. So all that sort of stuff, they thought they were terribly, terribly important and right about everything. And they were so utterly deluded and stupid.
Is that still going on?
Yeah, yeah, they a big book came out about it, actually by a brilliant journalist called Andrew Hogg, and Peter Howland. They were at the Evening Standard and they started getting all these stories coming around London of all these people who had these crazy experiences. So they wrote a book called Secret Cult, which you could still get, and
I'm
that
gonna
really
get
shocked them. One of the schools got closed down. But I'd actually just gone out already because my mother had got fed up of having four kids. It's very misogynistic, so the woman was only allowed to sort of stay at home and wear, underwear made of natural fibres and long skirts and tend for the children. So she
that.
got married and then suddenly realised she was in this fairly awful situation. And by the time she had four children, now I was getting incredibly miserable at school, but my friend and myself just used to run away.
Yeah.
So, and shoplift, and we just became like little oiks running around the streets of London. So it was obvious that we weren't going to be there. And Mum could see how miserable everyone was, and eventually she divorced my dad. We all got out. Big court battle, but so yeah, the marriage was lost, but we got our lives back.
Yeah, strong woman. Good role model to
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
Yeah. And I have to say, having known and know your wonderful wife, could not be more different than the misogynistic childhood that you were exposed to. It's nothing at all like Anna is strong and brave and yeah, amazing.
Well,
So
it's a good female role model for my early life, isn't it? You have all these, pompous old cult-ridden males treating, women must stay at home and we must run the world because that's our lot. And then I had my mother who was just right. We're all out. My kids come first. And they took her to court and they tried to portray her in all sorts of ways. But she got us out. So good on
yeah,
her, right?
yeah, good on her. So going into the theme of rock bottoms, which I like to explore with all the guests, that sounds like you had one quite early years.
There were quite a lot while being at the school, and there was a time when I was ended up in a kind of standoff with the headmaster. He wanted to cane me, and I said I wasn't going to. So that was that was that was a rock bottom. Because at that point I don't know how old I was, maybe 10-ish, or maybe 10 or 11. But I was sort of quite suicidal then, and I thought I'd take. I had no idea. I took the bread knife upstairs and I thought, well, I'm not going to stick this bloody thing in me. So it didn't go very far, but
Yeah.
the thought was there at that point, so it wasn't good. But my solution was just like run away with my pal Julian all the time, and that was actually a much more positive way around it.
Yeah. Wow. So some quite early on rock bottoms, but then once you got out and started your new life, how did that look?
Yeah, well, we had a kind of stepdad, and he'd helped mum to get out. Also, he'd been previously in the School of Economic Science, so he knew all about it, and he probably helped her have the strength to do that as well. So he was about. They ran a building company. I went to a conventional school, just down here in West London, and yeah, just got on with a relatively normal life.
And then how did you get into the boat life and meeting Anna? When did that happen?
I've got to drop another bit in first because
Okay.
actually the biggest thing that I absolutely wanted to do all the way through those years was go and race motorbikes.
Yes.
Which couldn't have been more different to my upbringing. It was so far off the radar of that upbringing, and whoever I saw that was doing it, I think a couple of my friends started talking about Barry Sheen racing the bikes, and for whatever reason, I just looked at that like that is what I want to do. Just
Yeah.
so far away from this sanctimonious rubbish. But from about the age of 13, I was completely set on that. 16, I got a moped. 18, I went to the racetrack. To begin with, I'm absolutely hopeless. I didn't have an upbringing really for it or anyone in the family that knew how to do it. But I ended up racing for 15 years. So that really, up until I got to my 30s, that was everything that I did.
That was your like passion, purpose, escape.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I just latched onto that. And, you can see why it was so different to that upbringing. thought, no more sanctimonious. We're better than the rest of the world praying in Sanskrit. But, it was, fast, whatever stupid words, but live fast, die young. Traveling around the world, that whole thing, that sort of, the Barry Sheen, James Hunt, that whole thing, that was what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean you really took on the traveling around the world energy from that as well, because you've been absolutely everywhere.
Went lots of places racing. We just drove around Europe in this big old truck, which was great. Just drove from one country to another.
Yeah.
And then had some out of Europe races, raced in Brazil and Japan, Australia. That was amazing. But yeah, definitely got the travel bug, and then had some other really good traveling experiences later on.
So how, when you started doing that, how did you fund that, right? Because that's the dream. Everyone wants to, just get up and go and like jet around the world in one way or another. How did you fund this?
Yeah, with great difficulty, truth be told. To begin with, there was a telesales job, and then I tried to do, if you like, freelancing, so I had more time for it. But whenever I freelanced, there was never enough money. I ended up getting trained in COBOL programming and did that for a couple of years. But
Okay.
eventually I went off to do a couple of races overseas, and my boss said, if you go and do that race, you can't come back here. So I went and did the race. And then I freelanced for a few more years, and tried to put together sponsorship deals and gradually got better at that. But it was always hard to bring enough money in that way.
Yeah. And how long did that adventure last?
Well, I got through to my early 30s, and I've actually got quite good by the end of it. I was winning British Championship races, and I've done some deals. We got sponsorship with Cadbury's and BT, and with Radio Atlantic 252, and got bikes from Yamaha. So it was getting a lot more established, and won some decent stuff. Um, and I'd also gone back into work, and was doing IT contracts, and that meant I had regular money coming in from that as well. So the last
Yeah.
couple of years were actually quite effective. But I got to a certain point in my life. I've been doing it for 15 years. The actual original dream I had of which was that whole going off traveling around Europe, and they call it continental circus, and doing that racing was hard to do with a job. And although you could keep on racing in Britain and be quite successful, making the jump back out to Europe again was hard. I'd done it originally with no money and struggled a bit. Come back to Britain, got more successful, but to jump back out to Europe, there was no obvious way of funding it. So
Yeah.
the dream was sort of gone. You get to a point in your 30s, you're now quite good at it. You can keep winning, but you're probably never going to have the career that you originally imagined in your teens. And eventually, it's a bit like, actually, I'm ready for something else now. I've done all I'm going to do here in terms of pursuing that dream. So I should think about something else to do with the rest of my life.
And what was that?
No idea.
Yeah.
There was no other plan at this point in time. There
Okay.
was only ever one plan. So then I had to come up with a plan, which was odd when you get to your 30s. Most people have been through that probably in their late teens when there's no plan, right? And eventually latch onto something.
I mean, I started all over at 30 and again at 40. So I fully respect that. And I think you feel it inside. And I say this with clients too, especially a lot of the ones that are like doing corporate jobs in London, and they're like, why am I not happy with my work? And I'm like, because this isn't what you're supposed to be doing. Like, it's not natural. No one's supposed to like go work in a box all day and commute. It's very unnatural. And so when people start feeling those yearnings from deep inside, those whispers that there's like more to do or more to see, I always tell them this is a good time to start exploring other things that you can do, other ways to enhance your CV or, your profile. Like, what are some passion projects you can start doing on the side? Because those whispers that you're hearing inside, they're not going to get quieter. They will stay consistent and just get louder and louder until you do something about it.
You'd be glad to know I did figure that out. So I was having finished the bikes. I was doing my IT contracts and living in London. I was like, I had a couple of years of partying because I'd been relatively clean living before that. But
Hmm.
then it was a bit like, well, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life in London doing a job. So I packed it all up and went to New Zealand. And Original aim to travel around the world. I was going to meet my pal Malk in Ethiopia, but I never made it that far because I stopped in New Zealand. And ended up meeting up with Anna, who's now my wife. We got a boat, we got a house, we got a son, and I was 5 years in New Zealand.
Yeah, I know your story from it starts with Anna,
Yeah.
who is
Well, there you
wonderful.
go.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
where.
You just decided to just go to New Zealand and then you met Anna. How did that?
Yeah, well, I was actually chasing after someone, which rapidly came to nothing.
Oh.
But by that point, I'd done an English winter followed by a New Zealand winter, and I thought, I'm damned if I'm going to do a third winter in a row, so I'll stay in New Zealand a bit longer. And I had this, it was an absolutely wonderful flat, with a flatmate, couple of flatmates that are friends to this day. And the way it worked out, Ange, who now lives in a farm in New Zealand in the high country, was that she ran the flat. She recruited two new flatmates one weekend, myself and an English girl called Sarah. So we were new in this flat, and Sarah went up to the hockey club, met two English girls who she got chatting to, and invited them round for dinner. So I'm sitting in the flat one evening, and the door goes, and I'm the one that answers it. There's these two English girls at the door saying, "Hi, can we come in?" So I said, "Yes, you may." And that was Anna and her great friend Jill, who's now Sam's godmother.
So she literally walked through your door.
Yep. Yep. As luck would have it, we were planning a Valga vodka party in the flat, and Anna managed a wine shop and was therefore able to get us any amount we needed of vodka at a very good price.
That's
So
good.
she was invited.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you guys started dating like straight away?
Yeah. Well, not immediately. She actually turned up at the party with a boyfriend, but he didn't really get into the spirit of the event, and kind of yeah, he had to go. So yeah, we started dating after that.
Okay. Nice. So then that put you there for 5 years.
Yep.
And the
Well, we
boat
bought a boat. Oh,
amazing.
firstly, we sailed with other people for a while, and then that's a bit frustrating because obviously you can't take your boat away at the weekend and do your own thing. And if you're doing a race around Auckland Harbour, which is a brilliant, brilliant place for sailing racing, it's very sociable, rum racing. So you mustn't spill your rum. But you also people make decisions on the boat. You think, oh, that was wrong, but of course you're not the skipper, so you can't. You have to do it. So eventually we thought we need to get our own boat. We make our own decisions, make our own mistakes, and go where we want to go at the weekends. And we started looking around for all sorts of little boats, dinghies, and weird things, and ended up, of course, being upsold. Met a wonderful fella called Ian who was selling his boat, and ended up buying this small yacht for 11,000 Kiwi dollars, which is kind of £4,000 or £5,000.
Yeah.
And that was it. She was called Mondragon, and that was our boat for the next 3 or 4 years. Absolutely wonderful little boat.
Was Sam already in existence yet when you got the boat?
No, the day there was the day when Anna was pregnant and Sam was near to coming, but that morning we had to move the boat across West Haven Marina from one place to another. And we're down at the boat and we're moving it, and Anna suddenly starts getting all these like, you know, and that's when the contractions started.
Wow.
So we moved the boat and then went home. And so Sam was born into the boating era. When he was quite small, we would take him sailing, and you could get his car seat and put it on the railings and fix it on in the boat. So and then both of us could still race the boat.
Wow.
And he'd have the bibs the children have, the little pelican bibs. If you
Yeah.
fill that with raisins, he was happy as anything. He'd sit there like eating these raisins. So you could be like putting the spinnaker up and starting the race. He'd just be eating the raisins out of the bib, and everyone, of course, was like laughing at us with our small chumpy
Wow.
child
That's so
sitting there
so
eating his raisin.
he like some of his first memories were literally being strapped onto the side of the boat.
He probably wouldn't remember that early on. We do have some lovely photos. You know, you take these big trolleys at marinas down to the water with all your luggage and all your sails and
Yeah.
everything in them. And we would put a few things in the trolley, put Sam in the middle, and then pile more things around him. So all that was left was a little tiny face. And you take the trolley along, and then people would walk the other way. They'd suddenly just do a double take when they realised that there was a small child's face sticking out from between the bags with a massive grin on it. So we have those photos.
Wow, I feel like now that I know Sam, this explains so much. Like he is one of the coolest young men that I've ever met. He's just like so easygoing, go with the flow, like lovely temperament and very talented at so many things. But he's picked up this joie de vivre from you and Anna. Like that's a very unconventional childhood.
He's had his conventional bits. We went back, and put him in school and all that kind of thing. So he's been back to school and done that for several years at a time. So, but we
Yeah.
like to punctuate that with little changes.
Yeah, and you've taken him, you guys have gone really like all around the world on the boat, right?
Yeah. So at that time, we just before Sam was born, we did a partial Pacific crossing to Tonga.
Mhm.
And then I did a few sailing trips there. But later on, we got on the boat. 2013, we were running a business now back in Britain, and just thought we were able to go away. Sam was old enough; he could swim, and we thought, this is if we're ever going to take him out of school and do this, we will. So he was about 8.
Yeah.
We got a boat and went from Athens, spent a year in the Mediterranean, and then crossed the Atlantic, and then went up and down America from the Caribbean to New York and back.
And you can do that like with in terms of taking him out of school.
Some countries don't allow homeschooling. Germany, I believe, and Greece don't allow it. But of course, if you leave the country, then who's to say? Um, and there was interesting views, of course. Conventional parts of the families, like Anna's dad would have said things like, "You're taking my grandchild out of school. You're going to ruin his education."
Uh-huh.
But then you speak to friends that are teachers, and they say 90% of what we do is just crowd control. Probably the learning they do is maximum 1 hour a day.
Yeah.
And based on our experience, people that take their children out of school, if they come back a year or two later, the child has probably advanced so much above their peers, they either need to go up a year, or they move them across into a private school or something, because those life experiences will advance them so much.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's really true. I like that. And he was still quite young. So by secondary school, he was in school, right?
Yeah, and that was part of our decision to come back. So various things were happening on the boat. The business wasn't in good shape while we weren't there, and we'd either have to come back to close it or fix it. Anna's dad was on his last legs, and she was coming back to care for him. And Sam, after 3 years of being homeschooled by his parents, said, "I want to go to school."
Yeah, I want some
So,
friends.
for all those reasons, it's a bit like time on the boat ran out, and we came back.
You said business was struggling. What was the business at that
When
point?
we when we came back from New Zealand, we set up a web business in Cornwall. I'd done all that IT work, but there wasn't much call for that down there. But everybody wanted web, so we kind of got into building e-commerce and community sites, and then off that started learning digital marketing on the basis that a website with no visitors is like a car with square wheels. It's absolutely
Yeah.
useless. So we got into SEO and pay-per-click and email marketing and all the things that make a website and a web business work. We had the idea then we'd start building our own e-commerce, but we actually just got so swallowed up in customers' work that we never really got around to doing that. But we ended up with this great little agency, team of 10, growing reputation in Cornwall. So it was quite a successful little business. But Cornwall was a very small town for me, and one of the reasons for going on the boat was I wanted to, not be in there forever. So that's why the boat trip started,
And why Cornwall of all places?
because Anna's from there.
Ah, okay. Okay. I always wondered why you
Yeah,
guys had a place down there. Yeah.
parents were there, and it was. We felt if we're somewhere on the south coast, then we would have the opportunity to do things with boats and not be too corporate. And that's why we actually called the business Channel in the first place. We called it Channel Computing, and then later changed it to Channel Digital. But just that we thought, well, we can be anywhere on the south coast now, so we'll be something to do with the sea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and that kind of takes you pretty close to around when I met you. Not far off.
Yes, because when we
Yeah.
came back from the boat trip, I wanted to be back in London. I didn't want to go straight back to Cornwall and that business again. I wanted to live in London. Business wasn't making enough money to pay rent in London, and so I had to go and get a job, and that's when I found Fuller's. Fuller's is a very nice company. It's, very sort of family oriented, very old school.
Yeah.
It's a nice big part of the pubs. Many people at the time got involved in it because it had the brewery. This very old brewery had been going, it was 175 years, under family ownership. So a lot of our friends joined the graduate training scheme, and it was all about being part of the brewery. Um, and then one day they sold the brewery,
Yeah.
and on the basis that they couldn't make it profitable, and but the pubs and hotels were, so they just sold the brewery to Asahi. massive change and very interesting process to be a part of when you're dealing with your teams potentially being made redundant.
Yeah.
Um, and changing a bit, working in tech, all the way the systems then have to change. So that acquisition, facilitating an acquisition was interesting. But it was old school. It was never going to be tech led, but
Yeah.
nice because of the pubs. But the tech was last with them, and you could see them. You could see them failing for that reason. As in the way that communications have changed and are now digital, and the way to use digital channels is utterly different to the way that advertising and marketing used to work in the past.
Yeah.
And whereas many legacy companies are still trying to use the social channels as though it was just a place to book adverts like they used to do, in newspapers. So many legacy companies all the time that continue to do this, they're killing themselves by failing to adapt. So if you're there in a tech
Yeah.
role and you kind of know how to do this, then you think, well, I can't, they're not going to change. So there's no point in me being a part of this.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's really frustrating. That experience of the brewery being sold, that was when I left Fuller's, and that was a smallish rock bottom moment for me as well, because I was so excited to finally be in the head office team, in this, family legacy company. And I was so excited when I started working in head office that there were so many people that had been working for the company for like 15 years, 20 years. And I was like, wow, okay, like the turnover is low. Everyone's really happy. People are here for life, and I was really excited about that. And it was like 4 months later they sold the brewery and the majority of my team was made redundant. It was just like, yeah, very, very frustrating. Um, but definitely not adapting to change fast enough is definitely something that I've witnessed in a lot of places because I did social media and I did marketing for a long time. And with the bigger companies, unless it was like an advertising agency where they're more sort of switched on, I did find that a lot of big companies really, it's like they just didn't get it. They didn't grasp, you can't approach socials in the same way as like old school ad campaigns. It's completely different. So, yeah.
But yeah, and the way that marketing used to be done, some of it's still valid, isn't it? The strategies, the 5 Ps, all of that kind of thing is still valid. But if yeah, if you try and hold on as tight, they used to be able to hold on tight, and every pixel of every advert was laid out perfectly, and the brand was fully in control. And with social, that all got lost, and it all became about interactivity. And if you tried to keep on holding on tight and didn't embrace the interactivity, that is where you lose. And huge old British companies, killing themselves even now, 20 years
Yeah.
after the digital revolution started, because they still can't embrace that change.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. So now, fast forward. So then you were at Mintel. That's where we reconnected, and you created a really beautiful team, and we're all really tight still, good friends, of everyone that worked on your team at Mintel, which is lovely. Um, can you tell us about what your current business is?
Yeah, I wanted to do, again, working for myself, and I wanted to do
Yeah.
something much more entrepreneurial. And I knew a bunch of people that were basically buying, building, and selling businesses, and that felt much more like me not being in a corporate environment, not being stuck at desk.
Mhm.
I launched into that. I went fully out on my own, looking to source businesses where people wanted to sell or exit. I started doing that back in June a year ago, properly full time. And then my first acquisition came through in February this year, and that's the motorcycle business that you know about.
So that literally, that's like going full circle. It's really wonderful that you're now working with the motorcycle company, right? Is that how it feels to you?
Yeah, no, it's great. They're obviously it's clearly my old passion. I'm very rusty. I've not really been directly involved for 25 years, so I have to be cautious about thinking that anything that applied in the 90s still applies now.
Yeah.
Uh, but motorcycle industry is in some trouble there. It's not that well managed. Quite a lot of companies have been going bankrupt. It's not in growth. So as an investor, It's not entirely rational to be involved in it. But there's also a large e-commerce element, and of course, I know I can add massive value there.
Yeah.
So you have to treat it really as an e-commerce and warehousing business rather than a motorcycle business, or at least keep the motorcycle business tacked on the side of it because we like that. And as long as it's making a small profit, then and keep those people employed, then you're fine.
Yeah. So, considering your career, which has been quite diverse, I would say, and
Understatement.
yeah, around the world. So you have a lot of global experience as well, which I think is important for a lot of people to hear. We both have navigated and probably will continue to at different life stages the visas, having bank accounts in different countries, like all of that. How have you kind of approached that throughout life? Do you view these things as just like something that you have to learn and figure out, or is it is it something that you would be like, "Oh, that's too difficult. I'm not going to do that."
No, if you want to live in a place, you have to do the stuff, don't you? And it's it can be quite hard and quite expensive, but at the same, it's not so hard and expensive that thousands and thousands of people don't manage to do it.
Yeah.
So my journey in New Zealand, I turned up on a tourist visa. I wanted a job, but to get a job, of course, you have to get a work permit. Um, as it happened, you kind of need to be on a skills list. So if you're a nurse or certain sorts of teachers, they really want you. But also with my IT skills, they really wanted you. So you can get sponsored by a company. And as you know, many of the brilliant people we hired at Mintel got sponsored because they had very particular skills to bring.
Yeah.
So that's normally a way in if you've got the right skills and experience. So I did that in New Zealand, got a job. The first job I got there, I was kind of, you're a bit of a captive, really, aren't you? Because once you're working for the company on a work permit,
Yeah.
they can underpay you and be a fairly crappy workplace, and there's not much you can do about it because if you leave the job, you leave the country.
Yeah.
So you're kind of a hostage. But it's a means to an end, and then hopefully a year or two later you get a better job and a new work permit, and you've worked your way back in. You have to be patient, don't you? You have to, when you make those changes, you have to work your way back in, really. And
Yeah.
I've done that on several occasions now. Then I wanted to get residency, as luck would have it. Anna was already resident, which she got as a result of a de facto partnership with a Kiwi fella at some point, and I got my residency as a result of a de facto partnership with her.
Yeah.
So you pass it down. And then after 5 years living there, paying your tax, doing a job, and avoiding jail, you're then entitled to go for citizenship. So we went and swore allegiance to the Queen of New Zealand and got our certificate.
So you are British and Kiwi now.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. That's a good one to have.
And
If
Sam
you
was born there, so he's the most Kiwi of us. But
Yeah.
so yeah, that was that. And then we got back to Britain, of course. Then you find out you got to almost start all over again. While you're away, you've become a non-person. All your credit has dried up. You've got to get back on the voter roll. Even getting a phone is hard. So it's comedic trying to get a mobile phone when you're a non-person. And Anna eventually had to get her mum to take the mobile phones on. And when the mobile phone company phoned, she'd end up having to impersonate her mum because they wouldn't speak to us, although we were paying the bills. So all of that kind of nonsense
Oh.
just to get yourself back on the ladder in a country which is only set up for people that have always been here.
Yeah, I mean, because I've left the UK a few times and come back since I was, 6 when I got here. So was here through school, but then after uni, I left for a few years and came back. And I remember being really surprised at how like the first job I got after uni was in London, and it was like they didn't know how to pay me because I couldn't get a bank. Like Barclays closed my account while I was away, and getting that reopened was such a pain. And so they had to put my pay for the first like 3 months into my dad's bank account, and my dad would just transfer it to me. I don't remember having issues with the phone, but that's true. The UK very much is only set up for under the understanding that like you live here only for long periods of time. It's frustrating.
Yeah, and governments, governments naturally. operate for people in that country, don't they? They're voted for by people in that country, and their interest is in making things work for the people in that country. So if you want to be a bit independent of countries, they're not really set up for you. But you have to,
Yeah.
you just learn to play the system, don't you? And you know, pick the country you want to be in, and when you're there, you play by their rules, don't you? And
Yeah.
that's just
I
what you do.
have
If you like to be mobile,
I have this issue whenever I'm in the US as well. If I have to do anything in the US bank and I try and explain, well, I don't really live here. Like I live in the UK, I'm British, and that just they just don't get it. And no form in the US, no online payment system, nothing will accept an international phone number or an international bank account. It's like endlessly frustrating. But yeah,
well,
I feel like
they're probably even more insular than us, aren't they? But
they are.
it's probably good, if you've got a bank account in a country, even if you're not living there, just leave it open. Just, even if you have to put 100 quid in every year or
Yeah.
something, because it's just such a pain reopening these things, isn't it? Unless they're charging you crazy fees. But yeah, remaking our way back into society here, and I still had my old bank account and my old credit card, and it was still difficult getting back in.
Yeah, I now have a bank account in Australia, bank account in the US, and bank account in the UK. So, yeah, we'll see what more I add to the collection over the next year or two.
Yeah, it's only
Um,
sensible if you want to be a bit mobile and enjoy your life in different places. It's just a sensible way to do it, I think.
yeah. Well, I think also it's changed a lot because of the fintech industry. So we've got, Revolut, Monzo, Starling. Someone was telling me about Tide recently, and these are
Yeah,
all
I've got one of those. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and I was looking at visa papers or like, residency papers in a couple of other countries, and most of them say, "Oh, you need to set up a local bank account first before you can apply for this." But they've now added an asterisk saying that they accept the online banks. So you can expedite that process with Revolut, Starling, Monzo, etc. So it's catching up a little, slowly but surely. On on the topic of money, what because obviously you're with your early childhood, I'm really curious what you learned from your, I guess, your father, and then what you learned from your mom later, who then had you exclusively. What were your money stories? What did you learn about how money is handled, savings? Did you learn any of that from your parents, or was it all self-taught?
Probably relatively conventional, actually. That would be the most conventional thing about our upbringing. As dad still had a job, and the whole School of Economic Science was made up of London professionals.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was just normal. You're supposed to do some savings, put something in the building society. You get a Christmas present from your grand, put it in the building society. So it's not, it's that, if you like, job doing middle class approach, which is all about, eventually setting yourself up for your pension, isn't it?
Hmm.
Rather than any sort of entrepreneurial impetus. There was no real entrepreneurs in our family, I suppose. So you didn't get that training, but just yeah, how to earn some money doing odd jobs and keep it somewhere safe. That was probably learned early on.
Yeah. And then what was your experience with your parents in terms of they demonstrated a traditional dealing with money, but what were their stories? I think we see millennials, my generation sees a lot of parents that had really extreme scarcity mindsets because their parents were World War One, World War Two, and Great Depression children. So there's like a lot of people that really struggle with spending. Like it terrifies them. They want to save, save, save. They never think that there's going to be enough. They want people to take a job that they hate because security is the most important thing in the world. And the rebellion of that is my generation and later is less concerned about safety and more concerned about the pursuit of freedom and happiness, and so will less likely take a job for security and wants to have fun and be free. What did you get from your parents? Because it seems very much like your later experience is being fun and being free. right?
Yeah, and the cult was very much about, you were very dutiful to the cult and to your society, and the man was supposed to do his job and provide for his family. So it was that very dutiful approach to money. And certainly grandparents were very much, been through the whole rationing thing. So
Yeah.
that I think no one was flash with money. We didn't eat in restaurants. The holidays were all camping holidays. So it was, but we had a house in Twickenham. We were perfectly comfortable, but you didn't flash it about, I suppose. But more than anything for those religious reasons. Dad had 4 kids, and a certain proportion of his money went to the cult. So I guess there wasn't a lot of disposable income.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
after the divorce, then Keith and Mum ran a building company. They were much more entrepreneurial. They got into multi-level marketing, which was a mess as far as I could tell. But
Really?
Mum basically lived off having a vast, run-down old house in Teddington, full of lodgers and dogs, and my motorbikes littered everywhere. So suddenly it was a totally different environment, much more free form, much more entrepreneurial, and that was probably how I went through my teens.
Okay.
After that, I'd say then it got into bike racing, and then after that, it was just a desperate scrabble for money for the next 15 years. So
Yeah.
yeah, just anything you can do to make a buck, buy and sell some bikes, get paid to do a race, whatever it was. So that was a different form of attitude to money, which was simply how the hell am I going to get enough for the next race?
Yeah. And whereas now, fast forward, and it seems you're in a much more stable, grounded place, holding on to money. You've got the house that because that was part of the reason why you went to Fuller's, right? Because you were trying to get a mortgage.
Yeah, and because I would, in the early days, there was never any thought of a pension or,
Yeah.
anything long term at all. So when I finished racing, I think, well, you've got to put something aside. But 15 years of racing, 5 years in New Zealand, you're not doing very well on your contributions. So we decided the best thing we can do is just get a couple of renters and try and build up some sort of a long term future that way. So it was really about getting some rental properties, and therefore, when we got back to the UK, it's a bit like, well, let's buy a house.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been the financial plan. Um, once I was an employee, I actually started building up a proper pension, but it's a bit late.
Yeah.
And so the question is now in terms of buying, building, and selling businesses, then you actually have the opportunity for a capital event that will set you up. Um, I may have to work extra years in order to offset the fact that I was so feckless in the younger years. But
Yeah.
that's fine. I made my choices, and that was always. I think if you go bike racing, you know that if you survive, um, then you have to have a different plan for the long term. And so my plan might be working a bit longer than other people.
I think a lot of people are going to have to work a lot longer these days. Haven't they just increased the age for pension?
I think it's 67, but I don't know. But no, I mean, there's the, and people, isn't it? It's a weird one. People love to, obviously, we all love to blame the government for everything, but there's this massive demographic situation, isn't there? I think the
Mm,
number of people over 80 now is 10 times what it was
yeah.
just 20 years ago. And yet the cost of looking after people over 80 is whatever multiple of people in their 20s and 30s. So, it's just the fact of the demographics that's suddenly changing all of that, and we have to cope if we want to keep our old people fed.
Yeah, England has a massive elderly population, and it's like the biggest they've ever had right now.
And everywhere, right? You look, Italy, Japan, absolutely everywhere is the same in the West, and lower birth rates, so you have less younger people to pay the tax. The only way you possibly can get any younger population is if you let immigration run. But if you don't want to do that politically, then it's a real question: who's actually going to pay all the old people's pensions?
Yeah, yeah, fun times.
No, it's
So,
fine. I think people, have been careful, have invested. If you're reliant on a state pension, then it's less in your hands. But thankfully, our government, you know, while trying to trim costs, do generally try and still feed pensioners. I know it's not a popular issue at the moment,
yeah,
as related to some countries where they just decided to write off all attempts to help the population out at all. So I think we fundamentally have a government where they try and do the right thing, at least at the broadest level.
yeah. Yeah. I like to ask people at the end of each episode what they think about in terms of if you can reflect back to one of your biggest rock bottom moments in your life, what advice would you today give to that version of yourself?
Oh, um, well, I mean, I've talked about the one when I was very young. I did the right thing. I just ran away a lot and got out of there, obviously with my mother's help. I had another one. When I was racing, I went through a period I desperately wanted to get into Grand Prix racing, and I went to do a Grand Prix in Brazil. And I managed to offend a Mr. Big, and there was some shenanigans that went on that made it look as though I hadn't qualified for the race, whereas in fact I had. So some really don't. And
Wow.
I had I'd been very naive. I hadn't played it well politically. I'd gone too early. I didn't really have resources to do it well. But I'd not played the politics of it well at all. Again, I hadn't known what I was getting into. But what I had to do after that was just basically find a way back into it and, prove that I was better than they made me out to be. So it was just about carrying on racing, try and make it work, and do better and better, which I eventually managed to do. So I think the advice would have been to stick at it, keep on doing it.
Don't give up.
Yeah, use what you've got and the friends you've made to build a better team. And there were quite often bad years. You get the wrong bike, and your whole year could be a write-off, and that happened to me on 3 or 4 occasions. So you have to come back from that. But at that point, I've sort of had a really grim reputation. You have less friends when you're not doing well.
Mm.
And so you have to get a little team together that you trust and that believe in you and you believe in them, make it all work again, and sort of really just work your way back out. And I managed to do it. So I think the advice would have been that's what you need to do. And I managed to figure that out at the time. But a few extra voices saying that's what you need to do, and just providing you with those extra resources. So it's not only the advice, is it? It's simply the resources and the extra skills you have from building a team around you. So I did build a team. I could have had a bigger, better team, and that would have helped more.
And you are very good at building teams, I can say, from having worked with you
And
personally.
and that's comes from the bike thing, doesn't it? Because I had to build this team, and of course I couldn't. Maybe one mechanic I could pay a pitiful wage, and
Mhm.
everyone came along on an amateur basis. So they had to believe in the project, and they had to believe in you. And I ended up with an absolutely wonderful team. We had a big get together in November last year of 22 of the people that helped me out over the years. And honestly, I can't be more grateful to a bunch of people. They would drive across Europe for me. They'd work through the night on an engine for me. They put everything back together when I smashed it up. What just a brilliant group of people. But I wasn't even paying them. At least when we got to, corporate world, at least, at least you lot were getting a wage.
Yeah, you could offer us money. Yeah. But I mean, I have to say, it's definitely one of your strengths. And when in a position where you're presented with an opportunity ever for the rest of your career to put together your own team, you should do that because you're really good at it. It's one of the, I mean, everyone loved your team at Fuller's. I remember when I used to go into the digital room, loving everyone that worked with you. And I'm still close with a couple of them as well, which is wonderful. And then at Mintel, which is a fairly social company. I think the teams, you know, stay pretty connected to each other and don't really intermingle that much. But people made comments regularly, like, "Are you guys actually that close?" And we would be like, to us telling everyone, "Yeah, no, we all hang out outside of work. Like, we love each other. They're some of my best friends. We all just flew across the world for Ria's wedding in India, which was incredible, and that was all down to you putting together. You handpicked pretty much every member of the team. So it's one of your
And,
skills.
yeah. But handpicked the team, but didn't everyone step up? Just the fact that, you or one of the others would always find someone a birthday present. I didn't have to do that. Would always, book somewhere really nice when we were going out.
Yeah.
People made the effort, and that was just fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Pete. That was a really nice note to finish with. And I know that everyone from your teams will listen to this and agree that that's one of your mega strengths. So thank you. And thank
Well,
you
no,
for
thank you, and I hope we cover all your questions.
everything.
Hope they do listen because I love them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to arrange our next get together.
Yep. I'm on it. I'll sort it. Thank you.
Cool.
Take care. Bye.
Catch you later. Bye.